Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the assignment that you are going to be working on in Module 5, the Annotated Bibliography Part 2, and the synthesis. And we're going to look first at the assignment description, and then I'm going to go into more detail about some aspects of this, as well as other things that you might want to think about. I know some of you are already working on this assignment, so I hope that this will be helpful to you as you move to completion of it. So the first part is that you're going to create a second set of annotated bibliographies that are composed of 7 articles. So instead of 5 this time, you'll have 7, using the instructions from set 1. So the format will be the same, except that you are only being given a half a page per annotation. And most of you used some of you actually did that in the first one, but and you were able to do it very well. But most of you used about 3/4 of a page. So you're going to have to cut back. So what kinds of things are you going to cut back? Well, things like repeating the names of the authors that's already in the reference. You can, of course, name the authors, but you don't need a sentence at the beginning that introduces the authors, tells something about them, the university that they teach at, and all that sort of thing. That will give you probably about 2 lines of space back, just taking that out. You don't need extra descriptors unless they're important to the content that you're trying to convey. In a way, it's like, I don't know how many of you are on Twitter, but if you're on Twitter and you want to tweet something that's and you want to include all of the information that you want to include, and you don't want to have a string of tweets underneath, then what you have to do is you have to get it within a certain number of characters that are given. And, what I end up doing is I'll have, it'll say I'm over by, let's say, 6 characters. How can I do that? Well, I go back and I find the words that I can take out without messing up the grammatical structure of the sentence or playing with the meaning. So these are the kinds of things that you're going to do. You're going to have to go back and you're going to have to edit it down so that you keep the essence, you keep the detail that's important, but you take out the things that are not. Because this annotation is meant to be short, sweet, to the point. It's not meant to have a lot of information there that you don't need. This is for you to look quickly and see an article that you are going to be that would be important for you to draw on in doing your research project. And so you don't need a lot of superfluous kind of information. So synthesize these 7 articles in relation to one another to the 5 articles. And once you've done that, you're going to complete a scholarly synthesis of the key ideas arising from the 7 most helpful articles of the 12 in total that you have annotated. So that means that you don't have to necessarily choose the 7 that you've just done up here. You can choose 7 across both Part 1 and Part 2. You can do all 7 from Part 2 if you want, but if you want to draw in even 1 or 2 from the first set that you did, that's fine too. So you're going to synthesize these 7 articles, whichever ones you've chosen, among the 12 that you have available to you in relation to one another. And we're going to talk in more detail about what that looks like. To the 5 articles from your first set, you're looking at that thinking, oh no, now do I have to do all 12 articles? No. What this means is that you'll draw from the 5 articles that remain outside of the 7 that you've chosen, if you need to, if you wish to. You don't necessarily have to use them, and you won't get extra points if you do. But if there's something in those 5 articles that is important in supporting the argument that you're putting forward in your synthesis, then you can draw on that, certainly. But first choice is always the 7 that you're working with. And to a potential research topic. So of course you're going to be relating these 7 that you've chosen to the research topic that you've chosen, and that will be your main theme, and then you will have sub-themes that come out of those readings, and I'll talk about that again in a moment. Look for commonalities across the readings, and look for differences in the articles and outliers in the articles, things that only one author said, for example, and use headings to organize your discussion. Include no more than 1 professional journal in this synthesis. So while up here you're allowed to have 2, Down here, you're only allowed to have one. So they need to be peer-reviewed articles. So if you're using, for example, a government study, that is not considered a peer-reviewed article. Even though there may be academics on that study, those kinds of studies never go to somebody else who's an expert in the field, who is outside of the group that put it together, that looks at it and says, oh, you've missed this, or this is excellent, or whatever it is that they're going to say. So there's been no peer review of that kind of literature. So be very careful about that. It should be a maximum of 5, it says in the original, 5 pages. That's not enough pages. I've said 5 to 7, and I probably should say 5 to 8 or 9. I don't mind it going up that high, because you're going to need about 4 probably by the time you put in your references and all that sort of thing for the for your annotations. So what's left is only about, if you had 5 pages, only 1 page. So if it goes up to 7 or 8, you've got about 4 to 5 pages you can add in there if you wish to. So, you know, so it should be maximum probably of up to about 9 pages. And again, because everything you write needs to be well edited and you know, to the point, kind of that tight writing that should be a hallmark of academic writing, then, you know, you're going to need probably, I would say 4 to 5 pages extra beyond what you've done up here. Double space, Times New Roman 12, that is, the font should be size 12, and 1-inch margins. And then, of course, using APA 7th edition for citations, references, where you put headings and how you set up headings and all that sort of thing. Okay, so your annotations. What do we have? I've already said most of this, but just to reiterate, they need to be concise and detailed. Again, those are not mutually exclusive. Half a page means keeping key information and dropping the rest, editing out words you don't need to convey meaning, constructing your sentences so that they aren't wordy, but they're full of juice. They're well edited. Demonstrate increase. They should demonstrate your increased knowledge about methodologies and methods that you've been gaining over the last couple of modules, particularly. Maximum length, half a page for each. Begin your next annotation right below the last one with 1 space to delineate change. If you wish to, you don't even have to put that space in, but some people like to do that. Your cover page and your references for the synthesis do not count in the page number. Maximum 4 pages for annotations, and it says 3 pages for synthesis. I changed my mind already. So you can have up to 4 or 5 pages if you need it, and many of you will. Okay. In other words, I'm not going to be terribly bothered about the length of the synthesis. I mean, if you've just gone on and on and on for no reason, then I might be bothered. But if what you're saying is concise, full of strong information, well-supported information, logically organized, etc., I'm not going to be upset. Okay, so what is synthesis? Well, the dictionary tells us it's the combination of parts or elements so as to form a whole, combining of often diverse conceptions into a coherent whole. So it's taking a lot of parts, a lot of things, and bringing them together in a whole where they are joined together not kind of as some random structure, but they come together to achieve something. The next part says, and the Cambridge English Dictionary says, it's the act of, and I really like this definition actually, the act of combining different ideas or things to make a whole that is new and different from the items considered separately. Now, some of you in your first annotations, you described an article that's a macro analysis, where an author does exactly what you're going to be doing in your synthesis. They pick out lots of key readings in a particular area. They synthesize that information, and they create new ideas as they do that. So they pull all of that information together, and new thoughts, new ideas emerge out of that analysis. And that's essentially what you're going to be doing as well. So it creates a whole that is meaningful, that comes together in a meaningful way, and it makes a whole that is new and different from the items considered separately. They don't disappear, but they become something else. Your literature review is, or why would you write a synthesis? Well, your literature review is a type of synthesis, and you're going to be doing a literature review in your research project. The lit review, or a synthesis of the literature that you're using, tells the reader what key themes emerge in the literature around your research topic. And that's exactly what you're going to be doing here. So it's a way to try out that kind of writing and see what works and what doesn't as you're pulling all of this together, and what it's like to have these masses of information and pulling them into something that makes sense all together. It's a scholarly skill that draws on all of the conceptual and writing skills you have been developing over your program. So it's a challenge, and it's one that I know that you're going to meet because I've been reading the work that you've been doing, and I know that you're ready for it. It may move across all aspects of what you now know about research, from methodology to methods to themes and concepts. So it's going to be a kind of more holistic look at all of that in relation to your research topic and as it relates to the readings that you've chosen. How do I approach doing a synthesis? Well, I've posted a couple of articles that I think are really helpful in on eClass. So have a look. There's one from Simply Psychology, and there's one from Purdue. I think it's their writing school or whatever. And each of these articles says some of the same things and some different things. So it's worth reading both of them. At the Simply Psychology article, just to see what kinds of things it offers to you. First of all, it just talks about how to synthesize written information from multiple sources. And then it gives you, which I think is really important to have a look at. It gives you a sorry, my computer is not cooperating here. But anyway, it gives you, first of all, an unsynthesized example. And I'm going to talk about what that is in a minute. But basically, it's Franz said this, Perez says this, Goldstein says this, and so on and so on. It might be written really well, but it's not synthesizing the information. And instead, underneath, if I can get my computer to cooperate here, I've had a terrible time with my computers for the last couple of days. But anyway, it gives you a synthesized example of the same information so that you can compare what those two examples look like. So if you're writing something that looks like this rather than this, then that's something that you need to be paying attention to. Okay. Gives you the 4 steps to synthesis. Sorry about all this information outside, but 4 steps to synthesize information from different sources. So it gives you those 4 steps. It shows you how to organize your sources, using different kinds of charts, etc. How to outline your structure, and you can do that through mind maps or whatever it is that works best for you. And then you're going to write your paragraphs with topic sentences that come out of how you've organized the information, all of that information that you've put together. And then, bad news, you need to revise, edit, and proofread. So this is not a process that is kind of a one-off. It will show. It is something that needs to be edited very, very carefully. The Purdue article has similar information and some differences as well, as I said, so it's worth having a close look at both of them to give you ideas about how to organize all of this information that you've been putting together. A synthesis is greater than the sum of its parts. So if you're hungry, like I am right now, this may make you really hungry because here's a delicious carrot cake. But a carrot cake doesn't become a carrot cake unless you have all of these separate ingredients. So here they are. I stole this off, didn't steal it, I took it off a Pinterest page. And so I haven't attributed it here, but it's from, I think, the Preppy Cook or something. But anyway, here's all of the separate ingredients. And when they are put together in the right order and in the right way, and then you put it in an oven, a miracle happens. And here we have this wonderful combination of ingredients that becomes a whole that is more than the sum of these parts. It becomes its own thing. Now, these don't disappear, but they've taken on a different form in terms of how they've been used to make this beautiful cake. Writing your synthesis then requires developing your key themes, and this will be reiterated in the articles that I've just shown you, and your sub-themes thoughtfully. Work on organizing them logically, and this will be what I'm looking for when I'm marking your paper as well. Do you use paragraphs to develop key ideas in a theme or sub-themes and lead the reader through your analysis, through your grammatical forms? Paragraphs are your friend. They are not receptacles of just anything you want to throw in them. Paragraphs are, your topic sentence tells you what the paragraph is about, and then your paragraph develops that idea, and then the last sentence leads you into your next paragraph that does the same thing. And so a reader reading through a paper like that knows exactly where the author is going with their analysis. And this is how you do it. You use your paragraphs to help you. And when people start to get careless in the use of their paragraphs and just throw a whole bunch of stuff in there that kind of seems to fit, but nothing fits together, it's like those separate ingredients. It just does not create the ideas in the way that you need to. So really use those paragraphs to build your case. And remember that a synthesis is not a list or a summary. So here's a list. Wallace argues that X. Maclay's research demonstrates Y. Guterman says Z or Z. We call this he said, she said. So it's kind of like this person says this person says this person says this. But they don't relate at all in that kind of writing to one another. But a synthesis instead considers carefully similarities and differences across readings. In other words, you stir up the ingredients. You don't just let them sit there on their own. While Wallace and Maclay agree that X is an important consideration when, I've just made up this topic, when working to improve literacy in predominantly low socioeconomic schools, Guterman disagrees in his study and argues instead that Z, whatever it happens to be. So this is where you can develop a synthesis, where you bring together the authors and they have the ideas of those authors have a conversation with one another. So it's not just separate, people standing in a corner talking to themselves. It's people talking together, researchers talking together about the topic that you're exploring. Writing your synthesis continued, and I'm almost done here. Always include an introduction. Now, I have it in the middle of all of these suggestions because oftentimes an introduction isn't actually written until you've finished your paper. And that's because in some ways you don't know exactly how your paper is going to fit together. So read over what you got and then introduce it with a short paragraph that talks about what you're going to do or what are some of the important things you're going to talk about in this paper. And then that will then, when I'm reading it or if somebody else is reading it, they will know what they're going to be reading. They know where they're going in this journey, and that will be a big help. Use quotes when key to analysis. In other words, use them judiciously. Don't just keep throwing quotes in just for the heck of it, just because the author sounds better than maybe you think you will. Instead, use quotes when they're really key to the analysis that you're putting forward. But don't cherry pick. And what do I mean by cherry pick? I mean when you use a quote from an author that in fact really in that article, that isn't what the author is saying. or it might be just a set of words that you pull out of a paper that has maybe nothing to do with what you're talking about, but it sounds good where you put them, when you put them in, as though that author was talking about the same thing. So make sure that your quote, the ideas in the quote, match the article that that author has written. And then you can use them, you know, quite judiciously then in your paper. Also use headings judiciously. I'm using that word a lot here, aren't I? But use headings where they're needed. And you might use subheadings too. Now, this is a fairly short paper, so you're probably not going to have a lot of headings. You're not going to have a lot of subheadings. But the headings will be signposts for the reader as well, telling them we're changing direction now. We're going to be looking at this. And so it's a way to do exactly that, change directions in your paper and tell the reader what it is that you're going to be looking at in this next section. But it can't be, preferably it's not just one paragraph that follows. It's probably more than that, and a more robust discussion than just that one paragraph would be. Prepare to write more than one draft, so give yourself time. This is not something that you can do with one draft. You really can't, unless you're, I don't know who you would be. I can't think of a writer that I know that would be able to do that, because you're drawing on so much. So you really have to whittle down. You have to think carefully about how you organize and place the information so that it makes most sense and so that your analysis is clear. Good writing counts. It always counts when I'm marking, because your writing is what carries your ideas. And your writing is what makes those ideas that you have in your head accessible to the reader who doesn't have, who isn't privy to what's going on in your head. All they have are the words in front of them. And those words have to say what you want them to say. So, you know, if you have the time to stand back from a paper for a day or two and just, and, you know, maybe at this point that isn't possible. Well, it probably is actually at this point. But anyway, if you have the chance to kind of step back from a paper and then look at it again with fresher eyes, that's when you start to see, these ideas don't, there's no way that they're linked together. So when you're reading this sentence, it really doesn't make sense, because it's like I've jumped from A to Z all of a sudden in the paper. Those kinds of things. So make sure that what you write carries the ideas that you want to them to carry, and that it does so in a logical and coherent way, so that as I'm traveling along the road that you've paved for me with, you know, well-written paragraphs with headings that make sense, where they're placed and the, you know, the actual words in the heading, etc., and that you've paved also through the order of the ideas that you're exploring, so that your analysis makes sense. Then I get what it is that you're saying. I don't have to keep stopping and thinking, what do they mean by this? And sometimes I get it after 2 or 3, you know, goes at it. Sometimes I don't. And so that's when that's a problem, because most readers are just going to keep reading. And if they don't get it, then you haven't been able to convey the ideas that you want to. Okay, I've blathered on long enough about this. I hope this has been helpful to you. And I know that the articles that I posted will be helpful to you as well. But certainly if you have any questions at all about this assignment or anything that I've said in this video, please let me know.